rather than champagne, we'll fight. I try to complicate my presentations by using a Linux laptop rather than Jupyter. So I wanted to start by introducing myself. I'm at Zarecor. I'm the VP of Engineering at an organization called Axim Collaborative. Axim Collaborative is a nonprofit that's focused on improving education. I'll say a little bit more about it in a minute. I'm also the chair of the Open edX project, thank you for oversight. And I'll say a little bit more about the project specifically in a second. In real life, I'm a husband and father, cook, and a soccer coach. And crucially for this presentation, I'm an open source lead. And I've been working on the Open edX project since it was released in 2013. And I wanted to talk to you today about why open source maintenance and sustainable open source is so important. And I want to introduce you, whether you run a company or whether you're a between developer, whether you're students, why you should be involved in these teams and keep your open source sustainable. All right, so the organization that I represent is Axim Collaborative. It's a nonprofit that was formed by Harvard and MIT. We are focused on making education more accessible, effective, and palatable. We were specifically focused on communities that have been historically excluded from high-quality education opportunities. My particular focus at Axim is working with an open source learning management system called the Open edX platform. The project's mission is to democratize education and power advances in learning. Open edX was released as an open source platform by the edX appropriated in 2013, and it's used around the world to deliver higher speed edition. You may have taken a course on Open edX. Everyone's X is using it. Obviously, edX is using the platform. MIT actually also using it, but it's used by many organizations around the world to talk about the scope of the impact that Open edX has had. Right now, as of our last meeting, there are more than 4,500 instances of the platform of various sites around the world. 77 million monitors have taken a course on Open edX. And there are at least 70,000 distinct courses that have been offered for the environment. So we're pretty proud of the impact that our organization has had, but I also want to note that the community that builds and supports Open edX is much bigger than Axim. There are many members of the Microsoft team here who are members of the open source Open edX community. In the last year, 350 lead developers contributed some code to the platform. It's really a worldwide movement. It's not a single organization. It's spot street vendors that don't want. As a project, you don't just produce open source, but also consumers of open source software. So we're really concerned about the overall supply chain of open source and making sure it's sustainable and strong. Two particular projects that we rely on very deeply are the Django project. We use the Django framework as the underlying framework for the services that we deploy. And obviously, the open source project, that we saw here today, we rely on Open edX. It's almost uses React as well, but the back use versions of Cloud. And I want to talk about, I have like 5 chapters that I'll talk through here, but I'm going to make an argument that will culminate in why we should be calling these areas core sustaining. I'll start. Open source is anywhere. 2 perspectives: the developer perspective, the perspective of each of you and your writing code, and also from the company's perspective. I'm going to adopt the role of characterized like Captain Obvious for this part of the presentation, and maybe for the entire presentation. I don't think I'm going to tell you anything particularly new, but there's some intentionality to that. I think when we know something too well, we actually forget in a way. It becomes part of the backdrop, part of the given, and we don't take all the things into consideration as part of our self-conscious state of the activities. So also I'm going to present a bunch of research across open source business systems, not just Open edX, just broadly. And I'm going to be synthesizing some of those research reports. Now my urge to work. I just want to make that clear. but hopefully we connect the dots for you and make the arguments that will tell you at a different time. So maybe even more controversial than having a slide based in Jupyter Notebooks, I decided to do a slide based on Emacs, like that guy. So imagine in the course of developing a feature for an application that you're working on, you will encounter a block of text that looks like this. Does anybody know what we're looking at? Is that it? Exactly, basics. If you didn't know, with a little bit of experience in basic before you learn to write. The lines are a certain fixed length. It's a specific subset of a character set. The last line, which is incomplete, is terminated at equal sign. If you say you're working on a feature and you're expecting to have an image file that you could write to this, and instead you look at the file and you see this, or what's my next move here? And obviously what we do when it happens is we look up the RxD and we start to write base64 decoder because that's the only thing that you're possible to do. Except we don't. Instead, we import the base64 module from the Python standard library, assuming we're using PyCon, and we call the base64 decode function, pass in that string to get back the bytes that we write with this to have an image. Just so. But imagine you have a slightly more complicated feature that we're working on. We're retrieving a JSON document from a RESTful API. We obviously, we don't write an HTTP client every time we need to do something like that. Rather, we say flip a small request or something similar to that. And instead of worrying about building these little libraries, we worry about building the important kind of unique functionality that we've been tasked with delivering. And as developers, we do this a lot. It's a whole lot. It's maybe, DOS service. So many metrics that point to this in this presentation. But if we look at PyPy download stats, this is from about a week ago. On the day before, I told them 1.3 billion packages were downloaded from PyPy. And it tracks, pretty good because we expect over the week previous 8.1 billion, the month previous 32.6 billion. So as we're developing features and writing our requirements about text files or whatever, so that we use to manage how PyCon works, we are relying on upstream libraries and functionality continuously and in this massive, I wanted to talk about open source being everywhere from the perspective of companies. Synapse is a company that does what we call software supply chain management. They examine the software that companies produce, and they try to find the provenance of different libraries and packages that use the software in those packages. And in the last audit, which was published in 2023, 96% of the software that examined contained open source software. And 76% of the total code and software that was being built by these companies was of open source origin. 76%. These companies' perspectives, they're auditing the software to make sure that they're in compliance to licenses and have security access. 70% of the software that they are producing and delivering is open source. Similarly, 2022, the Linux Foundation did a similar study, and they found it varied by vertical, but between 20 to 85% of the overall software used by the people they surveyed was open source origin. So obviously, from the company's perspective, and it's not surprising, as developers, many of us work in industry, work with companies, we're using open source. So it's not surprising that the feature could be built when they're analyzed or going to be most open source, and the companies that hire us and deploy this are equally going to be dependent upon that open source element. Okay. So we've established open sources everywhere. We've been taking the task forward to Q&A time that have minutes to. I want to talk about open source being valued in two different ways. One is the companies tell us that they value it, that their sentiment is that it saves them time and money. And this, when it is research by the professors of HDS, try to put the monetary value in open sources that exist today. So the first is a study by the Pigs Foundation, again, came out almost a year ago. And this was a survey of about technology leaders, Fortune 500 companies, asking them the various questions, how it is usage, comparison around open source. And there were a couple critical insights I wanted to mention. One was, and this is not surprising, this is more kind of obvious material. Most respondents thought that it cost them significantly less money to use open source than to produce the software themselves. That having that 30 days is pulling into not the majority, 31% of the total respondents thought it would cost them about 4 times as much in the end of the novel solution without access to open source. And so from a company's profitability, productivity, velocity perspective, open source is nice. And that's kind of shows. And a set of researchers from HBS took a different approach. They looked across open source and they tried to put a monetary value on kind of expertise in 2 different dimensions. Didn't talk about that. Next. The punchline is that they determined that the value of open source software is also a lot. And then they look at it from a supply and demand perspective. The supply side is how much money would it cost to produce one new copy of a piece of open source if it didn't exist to what's available? And the answer to that question was they cost, all the open source they analyzed would cost about $4.8 billion to reproduce that software. And by the way, all the papers and all of the reports that I referenced are speaker notes. So when you get a copy of the presentation later, you can review all of this like this month. The demand side is a whole other ballgame. And the number that they came up with the demand side is $28 trillion supply demand. I'll explain it. It means that if we did not have an open source supply chain for producing software that we use, and each individual company needed to produce the low-level libraries and frameworks in order to deliver the software that delivered today with open source. But it didn't cost them $1 trillion to do that. So you get the idea that if the supply chain was unsafe or didn't exist, that the impact on the productivity of companies would be so gigantic that it would shape our lives. So just that $8.8 trillion isn't kind of a pot of money that we can redistribute. It's up here with that golden number. But just to give you a sense of the magnitude of it, if we had that much money, we could give $1,000 to every manual child on Earth, based on Earth population. So the magnitude of this amount is just like about that. So far we've talked about the fact that open source is everywhere. We've talked about the fact that it's valued and valuable. And now I want to talk about some of the things that open source allows us to do. It's an important addition to growing the prosperity, both growing of our cookies and also growing in terms of national economies of prosperity. To reiterate, today we rely on this high quality low-level libraries to produce the uniquely high-end software that we were creating. And this allows us as companies and developers to build up the value chain, meaning that we're building features that actually benefit our users. We're not in the middle of other stuff. So we're spending no time in building platforms like the OpenEdX platform, building all strategies, statistical packages, or logging frameworks, or what we do. An interesting study by some of the same researchers that I bring before about the valuation of open source looked at what the effect of contributing to open source was on startups and how that contributed to global growth. And there was one really interesting insight there, which was, and they were able, this is a working paper, so it's not published yet, but they were able to distinguish the selection effect from the treatment effect in this research, and kind of a robustly positive relationship between the OSS contribution and the entrepreneurial growth. And then of the two sentences I've highlighted in the bottom, first, it increased contributions, see an increase in their valuation and funding. So there is a pretty clear determination it's found in their research between companies that contribute and companies that grow and increase value. That's an important thing for companies to consider when they're thinking about spending their time on what means open source applications. This is for the world that I have before on. So we know that startups benefit from open source, both in terms of using it, also potentially in terms of increasing their valuation as they contribute. Startups are pretty obvious catalysts for global economic growth. So it's important to regions, countries, the world, and startups as successful. It's important to leave it. And again, just reinforcing that same point from the other study. Research reveals that contributing to OSS can lead to entrepreneurial growth worldwide with implications for policy and its So regions or countries that want to increase entrepreneurial growth have an interest in focusing on as well as the interest in open source allocation. And I think this not only improves the growth in companies, success of companies, it also improves the competitiveness and potentially some of the details of civil society, the strength of our democracies. So there's a lot at stake here also. But again, going back, we use open source all the time. It's everywhere. We value it. It produces a lot of value for us, but to some extent, it's legal threat. And I think we need to be paying a lot of attention to what's happening here as the conservative media and supposed to be the US editors, CEOs, developers to fix this problem. One of the bigger problems that I'm highlighting just concerning is unused software. Sonatype is a company that also does open source supply chain, managed to and maybe do analysis of supply chain, mostly focused on the Java ecosystem, but I think the insights translate to the Python as well. And concerningly, in the last year, they determined that there were 24,000 projects. Previous year had met their threshold for what a USD project was, and it had fallen out of meetings in the course of a single year. Representing 18%, 81.6% of the overall software that goes to the study. So every project that is downstream of one of these 24,000 projects now has a fall they weren't anticipating. And there are also kind of dimensions that we would consider there, but in order to have these tools to innovation and growth, how do we help these supply chains viable? And it doesn't feel like we have a very healthy supply chain today. And I'll offer that, one of the potential causes for this decrease in ownership is things care around. And we're seeing another organization's pilot also does supply chain management, supply chain analysis, but they try to connect it to open source containers and to find ways of supporting these taxonomic libraries so that they can continue to do their work. And what they had on against reporters from last year is that 60% of the maintainers have quit or have considered quitting maintaining one of the projects in Speaking. And they have, they survey a lot of maintainers, and they came up with a list of things that are sort of most needed by or wanted by maintainers to some of them. And I think it makes sense to take a moment to go through the details of the report. The first one is pretty obvious. Maintainers want to earn more data. Many maintainers are actually not paid for the job they do as maintainers. We think of open source developers as hobbyists, so they do it for the intrinsic value of maybe something corporate good in the world that's just something which they have. But mainly seems different from the creative process. The creative may get a lot of intrinsic enjoyment out of creating a piece of software that does something unique, but within the people adopt your software. And then you should make sure it's upgraded continuously and using release version like and we'll make sure that you're upgrading the classifying the security part. This is not what you signed up for, right? So they not only do you need a different sources of motivation to do the job, you probably are recently asked to be exhibit called KD or assignments to this work. Maintainers wanted to share the responsibilities. They didn't have to feel like a single point of failure for a project. A lot of times, projects are maintained by, I think the main maintainers for projects, like on-point tubers, like as well people to do the they wanted to do the like that. Intrinsic versus the intrinsic motivations to mature the open source. A lot of maintainers wanted to focus on the projects that interested them most. They created something that's valuable to other people, but they're not as interested in as they used to. They can help finding additional collaborators. They want a network. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger themselves again. And it's often when leadership and support. They feel like maybe they're out of know their speed, so to speak. They don't know what to be next, but they want people that would help them become better administrators. But I want to nuance this a little bit. Some of you obviously are thinking that maybe you have a role play supporting and sustaining moving forward. But this is a quote from another group working in public, which I was very interested in. It just said, one of the problems that maintainers face is that there are actually too many contributors, whether they're the wrong kind of contributors. So when we add new features to an existing open source project, we may be creating some value, but also creating additional periods and costs for the maintainers that they have to stick forward. So if we contribute something that's a lead feature, also contributing some maintenance systems working along with that, we're just highly on. So our approach to how we support you guys has to be nuanced. And I want to be clear that my goal of this presentation is not to create a clear service you can download. According to PyCon, I've been a maintainer of open source for a long time, been a user of open source for even longer. I couldn't be more excited about the value that we get out of this. But I usually need to confront the issues of this and it's the people in this room and other rooms like this that are like to help develop this sustainable path forward. I also don't think that there's going to be a cure-all or single solution or panacea for the problems that we really have. It's multiple different approaches to get it to move. All right, so next I'm going to talk about, what are the steps that the different players in supporting open source could take to sort of affirmative steps. A little bit about what's in it for us, maybe as the developers of the company. What can companies do to be better stewards or supporters of indexes as they go themselves? One is that companies can give their employees time to contribute. And I want to be clear that a lot of companies have these like 10% policies like that, but you can't just be lip service. I think this is taken really seriously. Companies have to actually goal engineers and to do performance reviews based on contributions of those projects rather than just have a nominal goal of this. Companies can pretty easily fund these years of projects that we rely on. There are a lot of mechanisms we use to pay. There are used to Patreon, or things to Open Collective, there are ways to make sure that engineers are being remunerated for the work that they have a new rely on. And then again, going back to that last point, as companies start to evolve their staff and maintain open source products, do some stuff that is in the drudgery. Do stuff that things like creating libraries, writing documentation, fixing bugs. It's not all about adding new features to PC software. It's all this stuff. And Steve John first all the new comments in the community. And this is just reiterating what I said before. That this goes directly on Linux Foundation. Companies should not just submit to our classes. Train their employees to become these teachers, community boarding access to the code reviews in the future. Companies are really placed to actually create an ecosystem where new maintainers are coming out to the team. And to me, this is something that the single person can do something that is higher career. And it's time and exhaust. And it could be people that you'll know that. So the idea of the opportunity or really life is not a really attractive conversation. So the idea is like, how can you continuous refresh of nature of these dear talents is the way forward in companies basically and what role on that. What the governments do, right? The governments play an important role here. There's open sources that come basically infrastructure that we use for economic growth. It's used as an sort of things like power delivery systems and military applications. So always worry about is there like what about this as well. Governments can and do define open source standards. They can, in particularly, have developers that are using grant on any produced software who can ensure that it is produced as open source so that the entire this populous set of this film. And they can ensure that regulations support why universities to live on cycle. The Cyber Resilience Act of the EU recently, I think it ended their place, but it started out. People didn't think it's going to have a pretty chilling effect on the delivery and this development of open source software. So I think it's incumbent upon governments to think about how policy are going to affect the creation of the services. Two examples of government economy or first projects to be in these are the Germans are PyCon, which allows companies or allows producers of infrastructure open source software to funding companies. Really important project. And then the POSE project for the National Science Foundation allows us to apply for grants to next stage develop open source software. These are great examples for anyone who wants to adopt this list. And then finally, what do each of us do? Joining a community of a project that you value, you'd be a great start. And I don't think maybe some more in the audience are already containers, but I'm encouraging you to go out and try to find a project to use into our own group base. But join the community, find out the community, the forums are, the does, our dirts, quick leads, contribute whether conscious that you join the piece. I'm not going to be hindrance to what others do to translate whether it or you, but I inherently do like you are at all. It's like, and over the course of your journey, you grow into the role of becoming a part of this emerging talent pool for a and can into use to open source projects. Talk a little bit about as an individual, I really think you get a lot of value out of work like this course. That always this resonates with everyone, but it only goes so far. We're giving back the paying for it's valuable, but I think you actually get some self-interested benefits out of the data of all those tiers. In my personal experience, these kind of open sources being a better energy journey. There are ways to contribute, not only in the organization, there are many ways to contribute to those projects. Translation and documentation, testing, many different ways. And I think you will become better for the journal, whichever one you contact. And I think working with distributed local communities will make you a better worker, a better leader. So I think it's an opportunity for you to step into a leadership role in your career and make a difference to a project that doesn't reach your I'll mention, so the founders and CEOs of companies product of this team. I think contributing and working with the products will actually also help you with labor. I mean, it's a great thing to have on your resume. Just like a really good story. Many years ago, there was a piece of software that I was using that wasn't upgraded to the latest version of the framework that I forgot. And I needed it to run on that framework. So I submitted a large pull request that fixed all of the breakage changes to the new version of my card with this major company that does movie streaming and three areas. And they were so excited that that's somebody that's keeping this work on. They're consulting that they needed it, they needed it, that they offered me a job. I think it was really there's really self-interested value out of wherever be the resource. Any additions are called, all choose to think this. So let's quickly view how we got our again, actual resources everywhere. Open source is valuable. Open source is poised to innovation and economic growth. Sustainable open source faces threats. If there are real things that companies, governments, and individuals to do to alleviate those threats. So, but if it needs to do it with trailing this argument, of course, we have a bit. But I'm happy to get questions now and try to build some further.
Oh well, we're thinking about look at him.
Thanks for talking. One of the things I was wondering about is you talked about at a policy area with governments, what governments can do. You talked about releasing stuff maybe. What about actually eating their own dog? So a lot of organizations, big policy calls release standards and libraries. But actually, when you go to look at offices, they're not using the stuff. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I've got a couple that I don't know if you have a specific one in mind, but I'm thinking about stuff like XAPI and statistic and so that there would be time, biggest one, whatnot, but for your spectrum. You could cause a government organizations that aren't that university. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of the role because depending on the U.S. government specifically, so Friday says that it's likely it could have, not that's supposed to be the confident decision to do that, but I think you all that from it. I mean, instead, it's going to be a service to cover the quality of the authors. Just you literally heard that.
Hi, thank you very much. So am I here. I think it was not that obvious, so it was very helpful also. It was not that obvious. So I think there's another thing you can add to your slide, maybe how universities can play a role in this, because there is a very important thing that we're bringing back to the university level. And Yasir, 3-4 years ago, we at Lux were trying to understand how can we change some of our courses to reflect the needs of the industry. Yasir had that if you can change marketing in one of your courses to bring open source excitement back, that would be a great contributor. So what we actually did that in one of our courses, we actually made it optional that you can contribute to open source, and there will be an assignment for that. And then we did a project for a couple of years, and students started working on that. And about 3-4 years, I look at and you'll see that our 15 or 20 of the top developers are actually not that fast enough, but they're top companies, and they praise the open source community for all the success they have. And one thing they talked about a lot was their quality of mentorship is. So I'm talking about, that you can do things in this way and that way, and a mentor comes in, play a huge role in the learning curve. This is very, very different. So I think that one contribution is much more substantial than what you get in an additional course. So I think that reflection is also very important. Your mentorship thing completely changed. So there's an incentive on your end that you can become a better leader by just contributing back to the system. And then secondly, I think what we also talked about is that you can pick a project of your choice. So you have a purpose in life. So if I'm very interested in an educational project, I can take that. If I'm very interested in a health project, I can take that. If I'm interested in something OSL, I can take that. This diversity of food is also there. I think this is also like you can have your purpose to that contribute, and I can pick up a better leader. So I think the university part is also very, very important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Leadership companies is really important. And I call it the orderly uniting that was supposed to trigger a retainer community without engineer or very related. The mentorship considered is just a totally next one. He's like in our community, the team that works Axim at X project has evidence of their base, over 60 years of experience working on this specific code base. And so the mentorship that team is to provide to the communities drastic. What I think is, one of the things that's called out in the book, working public, is that the scarcest resource in looking for communities is the attention of the API. So that's what it is. Why you need to create things for it. Let us, then we came to ask you to review the board with us and make sure, comment on them, have you fixed up again in a hurry. But I think mentoring someone who's trying to actually support of the project is one of the most satisfying aspects that you defer close to you getting the projects like this. That is like true transit when you live it is ideal.
Hey, let me tell you.
Thank you, Edward. My question is about open-ended. Actually, you are actually giving open-ended side from the academia. So, would you like to briefly give your experience about maintaining and your future plans about the open-ended? Just briefly about it.
Yeah. I would say it's just an interesting journey. OpenEdX was a platform to deliver moves massively online courses that was developed by edX. And it was just the latest open source of 2013, but I would say as open source project go, it suffered helps on that. I think that the project was very stable entity and sort of targeted that is the use of the way is the building of a general platform. Then it doesn't really things that Axim and collaborative in part is often levered it's just like that base or Jen. I think you use the platform for delivering courses where you're just curious about.
Yeah, like that. It's like the light to you see.
Yeah.
Or you whether you took any of it, or again, you have to see whether you got the way you put the block out. So, this is I'll be able to use that library value, whether and there were review or with that. Also,
your ABCs on campus, limited content. Yeah. A lot of organizations that are doing that today. I think it was showing supposedly at massive scale today. Well, it is solution and also broad, especially if you have course content. Consistently using your year which the students a well work so it's a very close
I had so my question is also to be reached your role with Axim. So the development clouds our IDEX feature as well as execution of open source. So what's the next steps? What are your plans as a plan forward of Axim? So how are you going to maintain the OpenEdX as a software, and more in general, what should be the approach if to maintain open source software need at some point in the or maintenance forward to use of that software?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there's a set of metric competitors that is involved by the Linux Foundation for measuring quality that's happening in open source projects. There's a project admin called the JAWS project. And one of the benefits that they adopts provide help from open source objects is called the elephant. And the way it works is to get what's the smallest number of organizations we need to add together such that their contributions to the project would drive 80% of the programs to be here. So a project would have a telephone tracker and one work, and this is obviously highly valuable clients on that same organization. And a couple of years ago, the older that episode was developed by it was a 1 full 2 year or 1.3 with a Axim becoming a simple organization. We had a nice core of developers to Axim who are focused on OpenEdX Office Nick. A school league. We have companies and parts of hundreds of developers who are focused on OpenEdX. I feel like we are a strong basis to move forward. I have a lot of friends who still love to you, a lot of people we've collaborated for years. So I'm very cognizant there's a situation all over that to pull out. Not the project quick of that and kind of the trouble is that they're facing. Yeah, but I think what we have is an opportunity to make to solve their more like community or the issue with focus. Again, it's not as that's my workshop right now. I just be making sure that projects is to people and ATU will spirit hard and go with that lots before and it's time. You saw that some of the careers wrong, it rolled forward. Thank you.